Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. In this video, we'll show you how to make a table cover that wraps around the edges of the table using shock cord to hold it in place. This makes installing and removing the table cover easy.
Hi, I'm Matt Grant from Sailrite, and today I want to talk to you about what I would do to cover an outdoor table. In this case, it's a teak table with slats where air can get through the slats. And what I've done up to this point with this table is used this horrible gray poly tarp. These are the poly tarps you can buy at a lot of the big box stores, and they come in certain sizes and they have grommets all the way around. And it worked fine for a while. I draped the whole table and put a shock cord around it, and it protects it and kept the teak in good condition, which this teak was redone about 2 years ago. So that works, but it's hideous. And there are a lot better ways to do it with a lot higher quality materials that will look like a fine cover cloth fabric when the project is done. So what do you want to use to cover a table like this? Well, it's a great question, because when you're dealing with a flat surface like this, a lot of people will think, well, hey, Sunbrella marine grade will work perfect for that. But if you have a flat table, or you have an outdoor kitchen space with a flat top, and you put something like Sunbrella marine grade on it without allowing it to have air underneath it or tent a little bit, what will happen is that you'll actually get some moisture transference from the top of the material underneath the material, and the surface will get wet. Now, in a case like this, it would still work okay, because we've got the open slats. You're going to get enough moisture coming up from the underside of the table that the Sunbrella marine grade would actually work great for this. Now, if you're on a boat, a ton of teak is used for tables on boats, but typically they don't have the slat construction. You would have a solid surface. And when you have a solid surface, you don't want moisture sitting on that solid surface between the cover cloth and the teak itself. So in those cases, what we recommend is you go with a vinyl cover cloth, something like a Samoy top, or any of the other vinyl fabrics that won't allow any water to go through. They're waterproof fabrics. And those waterproof fabrics will keep any moisture from going to the tabletop and protect the top. So that's why you see a lot of vinyl in those applications. However, if you don't want to use a vinyl and you want a breathable material, the answer is you want to incorporate something like a pool noodle in the design. And when I talk about a noodle, I'm talking about those round floats that are usually 6 foot long or so, that are made out of like a hard styrofoam. And you basically would just lay one of those on your tabletop, and then you would build your cover so that it goes over top of that, so it's tented and allows air to circulate under the cover. But again, in this particular case, we've got slats. We're going to pick a material that isn't waterproof. We don't want a vinyl. We want something that looks better. And we're going to build a tablecloth or table cover that simply wraps around the edges of the table with shock cord. Easy to put on, easy to take off.
In this first chapter, we'll discuss what fabrics would work best for your table cover.
We felt it was important to have a discussion about the fabric in more detail that you could use for this type of a cover project, in this case, a flat surface table. So what I want to talk to you about is using some of the reference tools that are available at Sailrite. At Sailrite, we have something on the website called the Outdoor Fabric Selection Guide. You can get to it easily in the search box by just typing OFSG for Outdoor Fabric Selection Guide. And when you search for that, it's going to pull up a chart where you can go and look at what fabrics to use for outdoor living spaces. And then in this particular case, you're going to want to go to covers, which generally covers, no pun intended, a lot of different things. But I want to go a little bit more granular with the information so that we can pick the best fabric for your table application. Looking at the guide, you'll see that we suggest 10 fabrics for this type of a cover application. I want to also tell you that you can purchase from Sailrite our Fabrics for Covers and Tops sample book, which has a lot more than 10 fabrics in it, but the 10 that we are going to be talking about are in here. So I just want to discuss what makes sense. Now, the fact of the matter is, you could use any of the samples or any of the fabrics in this book for the application that we're doing here, this tabletop cover, but some are better than others, and we only recommend 10 of them for a variety of reasons. So let's sort of narrow down what we're doing. Sunbrella, marine grade, yes, you could use it, but the abrasion resistance isn't very good, so it's not on the list. Sunbrella Sea Mark, again, you could use it. The abrasion resistance is fine. It's actually a waterproof fabric since it has a vinyl backing, and but it gives you that soft acrylic look on the top. It's not in the list only because it's overkill, but this is one of those materials that is so water resistant, it's waterproof, that you would need to vent under a flat tabletop if it didn't have the slats like ours does, so that you don't get moisture buildup underneath the material. So you'd need some venting here. This one is Top Notch 11.5. This is in the list, but only for the heaviest and most rigorous applications where you need Super Duty cloth. Obviously doesn't apply to what we're doing. Then we get to Top Notch 9. This is one that's on the list. And this particular material is a wonderful solution dyed polyester. It would work fine, breathes a little bit, probably heavier than what we need, wouldn't fold up as well as what I want, so not used. Then we get to Top Notch 1S. This is what we used. And if you had the book, you could feel that this is a much lighter material, still has a very good hand to it, has the urethane backing to it, which makes it nearly waterproof. And you can tell that by looking at the breathability score on the Outdoor Fabric Selection Guide chart. Since our table is slatted, we didn't have to tent it, and this works great. So that's what we used. Next selection is Top Gun, a very heavy acrylic coated polyester. Great for super durable cover applications. It is in the list, too heavy for what we're doing. Top Gun 1S, another really good lighter weight fabric. Would have worked just as well as the Top Notch 1S, but I'm a solution guide dye. I love solution dyed fabrics. That's where the color runs all the way through the yarn. It's actually colored before the yarn, or before the mixture is turned into a yarn. And that means that you won't have any colors rub off, and that the colors, it'll just hold its color fastness much better. So this one is not solution dyed, which means the color is topically applied, and that's the reason I didn't use it. Surlast, this would have actually been a great choice. This is in the book. Could have used this just as well as the Top Notch 1S. And it does breathe a little bit. Certainly would work well with a slatted tabletop. It would even work pretty well on a flat table without its slats. Odyssey, this would be another good choice. It is on the guide, but it's a little bit heavier than the Top Notch 1S, and as a result, actually, I'm sorry, it's lighter than the Top Notch 1S, but to me it just feels like it has a rougher hand, so I did not use it, but it would have worked. Okay, then we get to this one. This is the one that my wife thought we should use. This is Soft Touch. Soft Touch is like an Odyssey surface on the outside with a soft fuzzy backing on the backside, and this is a polyester backing. So this would protect a varnished surface or something like very fine furniture. This would have been a great choice. However, it's bulky. So when you want to take the cover off and put it away, you have a bulky application. But this would probably have been my second choice if I didn't care about it folding up compactly. Now we get into some vinyl products like the Stamoid Top and the Stamoid Light. Stamoid Top was not in the list of suggestions, but Light is. This would be a great one, but again, if we didn't have the slats or we were worried about moisture buildup, we would definitely want to tent it somehow in order to get some air under the cover, since it is 100% waterproof material. And then we will Herculite Riviera. Some of these others are just too heavy a vinyl, so they're not recommended. And marine topping, and that one no longer exists today, so we won't talk about it. Shelterite's way too heavy of a vinyl for this, which is why it's not on the list. Get into some cottons. Cottons absorb moisture, so you wouldn't want to put that flat on a table because it would just transfer moisture to the tabletop. So bad idea to use a marine treated cotton on something like this unless it's tented and not touching the surface. Camper Tex, that's for more RV type installations, and tonneau covers for truck beds. Then we get to something called Protect It, and Protect It is a very inexpensive material. It's like a quilted type material. Would work fine for this, but it's not as long lasting as the other options that we talked about. I know that was a long discussion to go over what I would suggest, but I wanted to give you my take on how I determined what material to use for this application, this tabletop cover, based upon the Outdoor Fabric Selection Guide. And really what you're looking at there is you have to make some decisions about what you think is most important. Now in this case, there are things that are just important in general. We have to worry about breathability. We have to worry about water transference. We have to worry a little bit about abrasion. So you can look at the general things that we rank the fabrics on, and you can say, okay, what things are imperative that I look at, and how do I want the fabric to behave? And then you can look at other things that maybe are just important to you. How important is it that there's a wide selection of colors? How important is it that the colors don't fade over time? And you take that information and boil it down, and it will help you to come up with one or two selections. In this case, it was top-notch 1S for us versus the soft touch material, and you can see which we went with.
In this chapter, we'll cut our fabric to size.
For this tabletop cover, we're going to be using top-notch 1S. It's a polyester fabric that's great for outdoor applications, highly water resistant. This is the outside surface. Underneath, it has a urethane coating, and I can feel it with my hands. It's a little bit tacky compared to this side, which is a little bit slippery. So this is the underside, and this is the outside surface. The teak tabletop, we measured the dimensions of it on the width and the length. The width was 39 1/4, and the length was 110 3/8. We're going to add 1 3/4 inch to both those dimensions. In other words, just 1 3/4 added to those two measurements. And that will account for seam allowance, and it'll give us a little bit of extra size because the fabric will shrink up a little bit as it's sewn. So 1 3/4 added to those two dimensions, and we'll measure our fabric and cut it out to size. I'm using a chalk pencil here. The marks typically come off pretty easily with a wet rag. So the urethane coating, this fabric does not unravel much, so we don't have to use a hot knife. We can use scissors. I'm using the clear acrylic ruler. I can see right through it, and I'm cutting a boxing that is 5 inches wide. We're going to have 3 inches basically come around the top of the table, and we'll have a sleeve with shock cord in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 2 strips that are equal to the long side and 2 strips that are equal to the short ends. In other words, the length and the width. And that way the corners that are sewn together will fall on the corners of the top plate. This is the back side of the fabric. It's got that little bit of a tacky urethane feel, so I'm going to put an X on these strips. I actually made a mark here by accident, but this way I know that this is the back side of the material and I don't get it confused. Okay, so now we'll cut our boxing strips out to the correct size, and we'll show you what we do next.
In this next chapter, we'll join our boxing strips together.
We've got all of our strips cut out. This is the wrong side, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip these long ends over so the X is facing the tabletop. So now that these are flipped around, we're going to take our short ends and we're going to make it so the outside surfaces face each other, which means the X faces up, because this is the outside surface and this is the outside surface. Our X is facing down here and up here, and we're going to base this to the end here. So this is basted to a long piece. Peel off the transfer paper, revealing the double-sided tape, and this is a tape that does not yellow in the sun and sticks very well. Baste it like that. Then we'll take this one, short piece, end piece, and we'll baste it to this one in the same manner. I'm going to apply the Deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide on the 1/2 inch mark of the needle plate of this, the Ultrafeed sewing machine. We're going to sew a 1/2 inch from the raw edge of this assembly, and we will do a little bit of reversing here and here. And we'll put our second piece in and repeat that process again. This is the short end here, and this is the long length. So again, X is down, where there's the X facing down, and this X is facing up, so outside surfaces face each other. So short end joined to long end. We're going to base these together, and then we'll do the same thing to the opposite end as well. So now we're sewing those two other ends in the same manner, and then we're going to do a top stitch. So here's the last one. To do a top stitch, I'm going to move the Deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide, and I don't really care where this top stitch falls, on the left side or the right side. We're just going to splay it open so that the seam allowance, or the tail, sometimes is what I call it, is laying in one direction, and then we'll sew a top stitch close to the splayed out section. This just gives it some reinforcement. I'm going to do it right there so that this fits right along that fold, and it also gives it a good look. A little bit of reversing. Sew down this side until you reach the bottom, and do a little bit of reversing here. And here's what it looks like, and we'll do that to all 4 of those seams that we did in the boxing. So there's the outside surface, and there's the underside.
In this next chapter, we'll create the sleeve for our shock cord.
So the X is facing up on this side, and obviously the X is facing down on the tabletop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a double hem here, and the first hem is going to be 1 inch. So what I'm going to do is, I mean, if you want to be really accurate, you can use the clear acrylic ruler and label it at 1 inch, and then it'll fold back to a 1/2 inch. I think I said the wrong thing at the beginning. So I'm going to fold this back and baste it in place, and then we'll fold this up and create a sleeve for our shock cord. So you can either strike a line, or you can estimate, because this doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. It's basically a boxing with a shock cord in a sleeve, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put double-sided tape down, and I'll just break it here to show you. If we had the line, I would fold it up to the line, but you can pretty much estimate where a 1/2 inch hem is without a line. So just do this to the line, and then continue looking to make sure that your 1/2 inch hem is approximately the right size. And we'll do this all around the perimeter. Okay, so we have the 1/2 inch hem done here, and what we're trying to go for is about 3 inches, but we need to account for the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to fold this up to approximately what I think 3.5 inches is. Oops, I'm a little bit off here. So we're creating that sleeve. So right there is 3.5 inches, and I'm going to mark it there. I'm going to go a little bit deeper than that. So that should give us a good sleeve for our shock cord. And then what I'm going to do is measure that So that's 2.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scribe a line that's 2.5 inches, just so that I can fold to that line, because it's when the hem gets bigger like this, it's a little bit harder to judge where to fold to. So I'm going to strike a line like that, and I'm going to go all the way down doing that, and then when we are done, what I'll do is I'll fold up to here and baste this in place on that line. I like to use a 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery. Now you can use the 3/8 inch wide as well, but I try to put as little glue on a sleeve that's going to have a line in it as possible. If you use a 3/8, just get as close to this folded edge as possible so that you don't have to worry about the rope getting caught up on the seam stick. But if you have 1/4 inch, use this. We're peeling up the transfer paper. Now we got to put a line in here as well, and to pull the shock cord through, what I like to do is I like to put about 2 foot of line going straight up from my edge, just so that I can have an exiting point. And I'm going to tuck the line into my fold and fold up to that line. And I'm going to use my fingers, my 3 fingers, to push the line into the fold so it doesn't get caught on my double-sided tape. And I will feed it in around the perimeter, creating the sleeve and the line all at the same time. This line will be used to pull the shock cord through at a later time. Okay, so now we're coming up to where we started. The 2 extra feet is kind of diminished because of the fact that we got the line stuck at I'm going to cut this line here. This is where it's going to come through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sewing here and start sewing here, so that I can finish this sewing at a later date when I get the shock cord put into there. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine. So here's my 2 pieces of line coming out. I'm going to start sewing here and stop sewing there. I'm going to sew right about here, and I'll put the magnetic guide on. I'm going to use this edge as a guide, because this edge is going to be the edge that people will notice. They won't notice the back side, and you want to make sure you don't sew through your line. All right. Do some reversing, and we'll just sew. So there's our stop point right here, and we just want to do a little bit of reversing there. And we're going to leave this unsewn until a later step.
In this next chapter, we'll sew the boxing to our top panel.
So now this is the outside surface. There's our hem on the bottom side for the sleeve. We want to put double-sided tape along the outer edge here, all along its length of the boxing. Now you've got to make sure that the outside surface is facing up. This is the underside with the urethane coating. It feels a teeny bit sticky. That's how I tell. Then we're going to take our boxing, and we need a short side, which is right there of the boxing. We're going to put it on so outside surfaces are facing each other. These corners should basically line up like they do. And I'm going to peel the transfer paper off. I don't have a break in the paper, so I'm going to just create one here at the corner by doing that. And I'm going to baste this so that the edges are flush. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk it down to the edge here, and if it's off, in other words, if this seam doesn't fall on the corner like that one does, I'll make adjustments by either pulling or shrinking the boxing as I baste. But let's see what it does without doing much of anything, because sometimes it shrinks up when it's sewing. Yeah, this one's right on, so I'm good. So that edge is on. So at this corner where it intersects the corner of the plate below, I'm just going to cut a little notch going no deeper than a 1/2 inch because I don't want to sew into my seam allowance. And that kind of helps the fabric to take that turn a little bit. This isn't a hard turn because we didn't have to pull the fabric much. If it shrunk up, we'd have to pull a little bit more on the boxing. I made my boxing just a teeny bit longer than the plate sides by probably a 1/4 inch or so, because I knew that when I sewed this seam, or the hem I should say, or the sleeve, that it would shrink up a teeny bit, and it did. So here you can see that it shrunk up a little bit. See how this seam is not falling on that corner? So that's easy to resolve because we're using double-sided tape. You can just unbaste it a little bit. I'm going to unbaste it to about here. And what I'll do is I'll pull more on the boxing to kind of stretch it. That's what we were talking about. You can make adjustments if necessary, and this needs some adjustment. So I'm pulling pretty hard on the boxing strip and then basting it down. And let's see what that does to our corner there. So I'm pulling, basting, and that's better. Not quite enough, but I think I'll just do it a little bit more. I can start at the beginning, which will give me more. So that's basically what you want to do if your corner's off. You just want to pull a little bit more. But I'm going to start up here further because I obviously need more. Same process. So I snip this corner. This is a kind of a close-up of it. And I baste that side down. And see how that corner opens up? And then you can baste the other side. My deluxe 5.5 inch magnetic guide is on the 1/2 inch mark of the needle plate. And we're just going to start sewing around the perimeter. Doesn't matter where you start. Do a little bit of reversing at the beginning and sew around. Now, outside surfaces are facing each other. This is the urethane side of the top notch 1S. Make sure that is the case before you start sewing this around the perimeter. Now when we get to a corner, I'll show you what we do. So we're coming up to a corner here. I'm going to sew about a 1/2 inch to this edge. Right about there. Needle's buried, lift my foot, pivot on the needle, roll this around, lay the fabric as flat as possible, lower the foot, and sew. So we don't have to put a top stitch in it. You could just leave it like this, but a top stitch makes it stronger, and I think it looks better. Now I'm going to put the tail or the seam allowance back towards the top. The reason being is that we want water to shed like this, like a shingle. If the tail were under the sleeve like this, then water could catch in there, and technically not a big deal, but it's better to have the seam or the seam allowance going towards the top plate so that water sheds like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my presser foot down so that this outside foot is the guide, and I'm going to keep it into this part where I did the first stitch. I'm going to splay the fabric apart left and right, and I'm going to start sewing anywhere around the perimeter. Here's a good enough spot. Do a little bit of reversing at the beginning, and then I'm going to make sure my tail is going towards the plate, in other words that way, as I sew around the perimeter. So notice I'm pulling left and right, and I'm guiding it carefully. I'm feeling that the seam allowance is the right direction, and we're coming close to this corner, and we'll show you what we'll do when we get there. Pull the fabric so it's splayed open on that seam. When you get to the corner, it's a little bit bulky. So go slow. Make sure the tails or the seam allowance is the right direction. Pull it open. Now hopefully you can see this, but I'm just pulling it open to that corner, going slow. And then when I get to that turn, I'm going to lift my foot and start pivoting around, making sure that the seam allowance is going that direction of the plate. I'm going to lower my foot. Don't want to sew with the foot up. I'm going to make that turn. And we're around that corner. So that's what you want to do for this top stitch. And we'll sew all the way around and show you what the results look like when we're done.
Next up, feeding the shock cord into the sleeve.
These are my chicken scratches of the table, so this is what we actually measured. So 39, we want to measure the perimeter of the original table, not the ones with seam allowance and so forth. So 39.25 plus 110.325, is that right? 7.5, okay. Equals that times 2, because we have to do all the way around the perimeter, is 299.25. I'm gonna write that down. Well, I already did, here. Now, usually I do a 10% reduction. So 299.25 times 0.1 means that I'm gonna subtract 30 inches, because it just has to be approximate. So 299 minus 10% is, we calculated at about 30 inches, equals 269, and we're going to divide that into feet. Divide by 12 equals, we need 22.41 feet of shock cord. So we're using 3/16 inch shock cord, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure it to this rope. What I'm going to probably do is tie a knot and put the rope inside of it. Woo, like so. So we have it secured well. And then I'm going to also wrap it with some tape. Okay, so we just want to make sure that that doesn't come off. So I've already got it started here. I accidentally sewed over my line here, so I had to rip a couple stitches here. And it's really better to have two people to do this. So one can hold the other corners. We might actually set that up because it's hard to pull this without having the whole cover be flat and having somebody on the other end. Yeah, I'm gonna need somebody over there. So I've got the cameraman over there now, so now he can kind of keep that end straight, and I can pull and kind of keep pulling the wrinkles out of the edge as we go, and he's helping to feed it through. If you have to, what you can do is you can actually open up the sleeve at the other end, which you might want to do. So I just opened up a small opening here so I could grab the line, and that way I can pull half of it through. And again, a second helper would be better, but I could probably get this done. I'm gonna need a second helper here. Yeah, grab that. There we go. Now it's feeding in. There we go. And he's kind of helping to feed the line in as I pull it through. So what I probably should have done is put the shock cord in, cut to size, and then tie strings onto the end, and then I don't have to pull as much through. But this is working. So I'm just pulling the line, then straightening the sleeve. Here's the line right here. I'm getting to the end. Now is it on?
I have no.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, we got it. So I also tied a line to this side, and I'll just pull it through, and we'll actually just use the opening on the other side to secure our shock cord. So I'm just going to feed it through by hand here until I get close to this corner, and then I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to pull the cord going in the opposite direction here. And I'll probably need a helper again to do this. I took the string off and the tape, and I like to just touch the ends of the shock cord with a hot knife or a lighter. It is a rubber band basically with a outer core, but that just keeps it from unraveling. And then I'm going to take a hog ring for the 3/16 inch shock cord, and I'm going to load it up in my hog ring pliers like so. And I'm going to place these side by side and then feed them into the hog ring and make sure there's plenty of overlap here, and then crimp it in place well. There's that. And then I think I'll do another one just to make sure that it stays. It looks like it's pretty secure, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. There we go. So that secures the shock cord well, and we can close this up now. So we have the line together. Now all we need to do is kind of work the fabric so that the distribution of the wrinkles is evenly placed. And this is just a matter of technically getting a second helper and kind of pulling the fabric around so the wrinkles are all around the perimeter evenly. And then we still have to sew this shut, and obviously the other end. So we have worked it around a little bit. We probably can do a little bit more, but before we go anymore, I'm just going to sew these shut. So, oops, I got some loose threads here. Let's get them cut here and here. The lines inside. You can almost baste this down with the basting tape that was there. We're going to just sew a little bit on top of those stitches that we have previously, doing some reversing here because we don't want that to come undone. So on top of these stitches by an inch or so, and do some reversing there. And we'll do the same thing to the other end as well, so we close up our sleeve. Okay, I think we're done here. We've got the wrinkles around the sleeve that are pretty much evenly distributed on all edges, which means it should be ready to install on the tabletop.
Our outdoor cable cover is now complete, and all we have to do is install it on the table. Just slip the cover over each edge of the table, and this cover will stay on in fairly high winds. Next up, we'll show you the materials and tools we use to make this table cover. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call or email. We're glad to help. From all of us here at Sailrite, I'm Seth Grant. Thanks for watching.